Many sad tales have been told about Africa. In fact, wherever 2 or 3 Africans are gathered, there's a lament in their mouths. Whenever a story about Africa is told and broadcast in the international media, it is most likely always about a bad thing. The sad reality is that we have come to get used to this kind of narrative, that it no longer bothers us or moves us. To the contrary, we actually get very surprised when somebody says something good about Africa. We are like Nathaniel. Can anything good come out of Africa? This seems to be the spirit behind a commentary that I read some time back in a book by Jonathan Lamb, or rather David Lamb, a book called The Africans. Some of you may have come across that book. Let me quote a few words that he says about Africa. If you read that book and you're a true African, you'll be amused, you will be happy, you will be sad, but most likely you will be angry. In one part he writes and he says, in Africa, to avoid stress, you move with the system. Not around it, not through it. If the phone doesn't work, the hotel is out of food, the air conditioner sputters and dies, the government official shows up 3 hours late for his appointment with you, the plane doesn't arrive on the scheduled time or day, you merely shrug and dismiss it and say, this is Africa. End of quote. Whereas this is a fairly common narrative, the story of Africa can change. And my message is that Africa can change. And something good can come out of Africa. There is so much potential in this continent that if it is well harnessed and exploited, can place this continent, our motherland, among the highest leagues of nation, if not above it. But, and a big but of that, the story of Africa will not change unless and until we make some radical adjustments on how we do things in this continent. Our system needs an overhaul. The way we do things. And my proposition is that now is the time to redeem our systems. Before we go into how we can go about that, I want to share with us a story that is recorded for us in the book of 2 Samuel. It's about King David. David, as you know, not myself, was one of the foremost leaders of Israel. God himself referred to David as a man after my own heart. I wish he could say that about me. This was because David had a deep love for God. David desired to please God. He had this conviction in his spirit that God is the only thing that matters in his life. And so, one time during David's reign as king, he had this conviction in his heart that he should bring the ark of God back to Jerusalem, the city of God. The ark had been captured during the reign of King Saul, his predecessor, and had stayed in enemy territory for many years. And so David hatched up this plan, which I will call Operation Return the Ark. ORA. Operation Return the Ark. This is recorded for us in 2 Samuel chapter 16. I'll read for us from verse 1 to 5. This is what the Bible says. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1 to 5. David again brought together out of Israel chosen men, 30,000 in all. He and all his men set out from Baalah of Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim that are on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and the whole house of Israel was celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with songs and with harps, with lyres, with tambourines, with sistrums, and with cymbals. Let us pause there and look at some critical things about this Operation Return the Ark. Number one, ORA was a noble idea. Bringing the Ark of God back to Jerusalem was a brilliant idea. The Ark represented the presence of God. Therefore, to have it in Jerusalem was a clear testimony that God was in the midst of his people. And by this very initiative, David was going to reestablish the worship of God in Jerusalem in the very presence of God, so that God, as it were, was not dwelling outside somewhere in the house of Abinadab, while the people of God were worshiping in Jerusalem. So David wanted to connect God with his people. And so he went out to bring this ark. It was a noble idea. Secondly, ORA had an excellent strategy. Before David embarked on the Operation Return the Ark, he consulted widely. Now, public participation. Kenyans, you know what that means. You could be taken to court for lack of public participation. A good idea could abort simply because you didn't have public participation. David embarked on a wide consultation with the community and spiritual leaders. They were all in agreement with him that this was an excellent mission. He therefore mobilized a large number of people, 30,000 men. They had a highly gifted music team. If you think our music team is something, and it is something, look at the description of David's music team. This ensured that everybody was engaged. Is our theme engage? Everybody was engaged on this Operation Return the Ark. A true mark of great leadership. People will not rally behind you if you are not a good leader. Number three, ORA had a great execution plan. In the Old Testament days, the ark was deemed so holy that no unclean thing was allowed to go near it. Therefore, in an apparent mark of reverence and honor to God, David purchased a brand new cart in which to transport the ark. Clean, sanctified, made sure that nothing unclean was near this ark. Furthermore, David mobilized a host of worshippers to escort the ark. There was great joy and celebration as the ark of God was taken round the meandering roads on its way to Jerusalem. David was at his best. You know that when they entered Jerusalem later, not on this particular occasion, David danced until his clothes fell off. That tells you how excited David was about the bringing of the ark of God into Jerusalem. So this was a great moment for David, and everything was going well. Unfortunately, that is the end of the good part of the story of Operation Return the Ark. Because the fourth thing that we notice is that ORA was a tragic failure. Before the ark could get to Jerusalem, there was a fatal accident. The Bible says in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 6, when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died right there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. In other words, with the stumbling of the ox, David's grand plan and project turned fatal. One of his faithful workers was struck dead, not by the devil, but by God. David's dancing was turned into mourning. The exact opposite of what the Bible promises, that he will turn our mourning into dancing. David's dancing was turned into mourning. In other words, this was a tragic moment for David. The Bible says in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 8, then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. Verse 9, David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. In simple terms, after the accident, David abandoned the ORA project. The question then that comes to mind is, why did David's noble idea face such a tragic failure? I want to propose that ORA employed a wrong system. ORA employed a wrong system. A careful study reveals to us that the system that David employed in this operation was not right. David himself later provides us with the details. He declares in ORA 2, because there was Operation Return the Ark 2, because the first one aborted. So he went into another one. But before he went to that one, which is recorded for us in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 11 to 13. 1 Chronicles 15, verse 11 to 13. The Bible says, then David summoned Zadok and Abiathar the priests, and Uriel, Isaiah, Joel, Shemaiah, Eliel, and Aminadab, the Levites. And this is what he said to them. You are the heads of the Levitical families. You and your fellow Levites are to consecrate yourselves and bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to the place that I have prepared for it. Now listen to verse 13. He says, it was because of you, the Levites, because you did not bring up the ark the first time, that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way. Self-accusation, self-confession. You Levites, you let us down. You allowed us to use different systems that are not in line with God's systems. And he confesses, we did not inquire about how to do it in the prescribed way. 3 things I want to note from that confession. Number 1 is that God has a system of doing things. God has a system for doing things. God had set out a process for how the ark of God and the other holy things were to be carried. And this was outlined very clearly by Moses in his writings, that when you want to transport the ark of God, this is how you do it. Unfortunately, David had not followed it the first time. Instead of using the Levites, who are supposed to be the ones to carry the ark of God on their shoulders, he purchased a brand new cart to carry the ark. The second thing I noticed there is that world systems will lead to failure.